The World Behind the Veil series.
My fingers brushed over the spines of the books as I walked down the history section. The school library was conjoined onto the main building. Both were the oldest buildings on campus. Dark, dated brickwork, eroded and stained over however many hundreds of years, hid a Gothic interior. Incredibly high ceilings were held up by thick, dusty wooden support beams. They crisscrossed from wall to wall. The once brightly colored stained glass windows now only allowed a dull glow to penetrate the rooms. None of the lights had been modernized since the turn of the last century, so they hung in iron-cast wall fittings placed high above the bookshelves, emitting a sickly orange glow. 2 chandeliers hung from either end of the long rectangular library. They held 30 candles in 3 rows, 15, 10, then 5, which were never lit. Ancient wax stalactites hung from each one like bony fingers reaching downward. A spiral iron staircase, situated in the middle of the 2 chandeliers, ran to the first and second floors. Thousands of books, from ones released in the past year back to who knows when, littered every wall. Sections, each with a specific genre, branched off down mazes of corridors. There was seating to each side of the staircase, and a desk was situated between the staircase and the entrance and exit, both which lead back to the main building. The library was always busy. It was the only real source of information. Kilnwick Tennant was a boarding school. I came from a long line of wealth, which had been passed down from generation to generation, all of who had attended KT. My 2 brothers had graduated and gone off to work for the family law firm. I was 10 years younger, so had a lot of catching up to do. KT was situated deep within the English countryside. Vast woodland and agricultural fields surrounded the enormous gardens of the estate. There were 7 buildings in all, the library and main building, where most of the classrooms and offices were situated. There was a gymnasium which held a sports hall, an Olympic swimming pool, and squash courts. Down in the gardens there was the potting shed, a huge greenhouse where the agricultural classes took place. On the left of the main building was the 4-story male dorm rooms. On the right, the female. Behind the library was the staff quarters, which was basically a dorm for the staff members. Then past that, down a long, well-kept path through the pruned hedges and the giant water fountain stood the boathouse, situated on the large lake that ran all the way up to the border of the property. It was truly breathtaking how big of a body of water it was. Due to the location, the sheer size of the estate, and the fact that Miss Armitage, the head mistress, hated the thought of modern technology encroaching on the educational foundations Kilnwick Tennant had been built on. There was no Wi-Fi, and the only phone signal you could get was a measly 2 bars from down near the fountain, which is why the library was always busy. I had nothing to study per se. It was getting to the end of the year, and most of my classes were complete. I had a maths exam coming up and a gym session I had to participate in, but other than that, I had done reasonably well in all subjects. But I definitely wasn't one of the cool kids. I could hold my own, I wasn't bullied, I did well in gym, and despite being into all the board games and literature what others would label as geeks were into, I wasn't the stereotypical spotty-faced, skinny, glasses-wearing know-it-all. So I preferred to get lost in one of the mazes of the library, find a book that caught my eye, throw down the pillow I carried, and read in the comfort of myself. I had friends, or rather, people I'd talk to, occasionally hang out with, maybe catch a ride to the nearest town, which was 2 hours or so down long country roads. But a lot of people went home during the holidays, a privilege I didn't have as my mother had moved abroad a long time ago and remarried, and my father practically lived at the office. I'd talk sporadically with both of them, but we really didn't have anything in common. Same with my siblings. So I scanned the bookshelf for something that jumped out at me. World War I, World War II, the Great Depression, history of Greece. I'd either studied them or read them before. I was coming to the end of the bookcase. I'd stopped paying attention to the titles on the spines, just letting my fingertips run over them, feeling the width of each one, if they were bound in fabric, leather, or the smooth, modern cover. My fingers ran over something rough. It crinkled as I touched it. A cold sensation ran through my fingers and into my palm. Still not looking at the book, I pulled it from the shelf and held it out in front of me. The book was thick, really thick, like a dictionary. and it was heavy, to the point where I brought it closer to my body as it ached my outstretched arms. The cover was a bone-white, leathery material that had frayed at the edges. Small grooves and indents, like the wrinkles of a person who lay on their deathbed, awaiting old age to take them, ran all over the back and front of the book. The spine, same material, equally wrinkled, seemed a few shades darker than the cover, as if browned by the exposure to the light. On the front, engraved into the cover, were 3 symbols: a goblet that had a thin base and a large bowl, decorated with a vine of thorns that seemed to wrap around from the brim and around T. The back was also bare. Placing the book under my arm, I carried it to where the bookshelf met the outer wall, threw the pillow into the corner, and slumped myself down, back against the brickwork. One of the iron cast lights hung directly above me. I placed the book onto my knee and tried to open it, but the cover didn't budge. Bewildered, I flipped the book around again in search for a lock that I had missed but couldn't see one. Wedging the book between my knees, I gripped onto the front and back covers and attempted to prise the book open. My fingertips turned white as I did so, but still, the book didn't budge. I got up and walked back to the shelf I had gotten the book from, to see if I had missed some sort of key or something. Nothing there. After examining the book again, prodding the symbols and attempting to open it numerous ways, I decided it was a lost cause and went to put it back. Walking over to the shelf, I placed the book onto the shelf and pushed it. As I did so, a burning sensation shot up my arm. I winced back and the book fell onto the floor, still closed. What the fuck? Bewildered again, I stared at the book on the floor. I could have just walked away, should have really. Could have to left the book there on the floor and let someone else put it back. But for reasons I really cannot explain, I picked it up and took it to the front desk. Hello, Jerry. What will it be today? Mrs. Bridges, the librarian, looked down her long nose at me. Her eyes creased at the edges, but her lips stayed expressionless, as close as a smile anybody was going to get. She was a warm, polite woman in her later years, but had a very mean streak on her if you went over on your borrowed time. I put the book down on the desk in front of her and waited. Her eyes glanced at the book, then back at me, lingered, then back to the book. She picked it up, turned out around, tried to open it, failed, becoming a little flustered around the cheeks, and placed it back down. Is this a prank, young man? This isn't one of my books. The warmth of her eyes had disappeared. She straightened her posture and seemed to tower over me. No, ma'am, I got it from the history section. My voice broke and my words spilled out. Enough with the games, Jerry Callahan. I did not expect this from you. Mrs. Bridges turned back around and started messing with some paperwork.
I stood there for a few seconds, not knowing what to do or say. I decided to pick the book up and stuff it into my backpack, then headed into the main building. Crossing in front of the grand staircase, my shoes squeaking on the polished floor, I pushed open one of the doors that lead out into the gardens. Climbing down the huge stone steps and walking past the perfectly pruned bushes, I could already see the fountain was packed. Whenever anyone needed to make a phone call or wanted to browse the internet, update their social media maybe, this is where they came to do it. So, as expected, the huge stone circle around the fountain, which people used to sit on, was elbow to elbow. Groups of kids littered the pathway, all giggling and showing one another videos or posts or whatever. I headed for an empty space, somewhere I knew I could still get decent signal and where I was as far away from others as I could get. Sitting down on the gravel path, I sheepishly pulled the book from my bag and started typing in the descriptions of the images on the cover. The horn brought nothing up, tattoo designs and Viking mythology, but nothing that directly matched the image. The mask brought up references to popular horror films and crappy Halloween costumes, and the goblet showed everything from Indiana Jones to the story of the Holy Grail. An hour's worth of looking through articles, images and videos, changing the description countless amount of times, and searching the upside-down wing brought up nothing. Honestly, I got bored and decided to just head back to the dorm. It was getting late, and the winter air brought a bite with it. My room was on the 3rd floor on the corner, which meant I didn't have a roommate as the 2 top floors were smaller to accommodate more students, but it also meant it got very cold as the 2 outer walls were badly insulated. At least I didn't have to put up with noise from 4 sides, though. My neighbours weren't bad. The guy above, older than me, sat and played video games all night. The one below took up guitar lessons not long back, but only really practiced in the afternoon, and Jacob to my left was no issue. He liked to study hard and hated any excessive noise, but he'd never had an issue from my side. Dodging kids in the hallways, I entered my room, closed the door, locked it shut, and emptied my bag onto the desk I had near the one window. The showers were communal, but it was like gold dust trying to get one in an evening, so I opted to attempt one tomorrow morning and stripped off, brushed my teeth in a cup of water on the bedside table, and climbed into bed.